morning from New Testament reading is from the book of John, chapter 10, verses 11 through 18. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
And your Old Testament reading comes from the book of Psalms. It is Psalm number 23. Did y'all know that it's like one of the weird exceptions in the Bible? It's, every book is often plural. We say Romans chapter 6. We say, 2 Kings chapter 4. The Psalm, all of the Psalms are, each psalm is a psalm. So we just say Psalm. It's okay to say Psalms chapter 23. I don't know, if we never talk about it, then it's just a weird thing. If we talk about it, sometimes we get a brain wrinkle, and it's good. Let's read together. I'll read. You read silently. Psalm 23. This is in the New Revised Standard Version, so it will be slightly different than the King James that most of you probably have memorized. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me. In the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. This is the Word of God.
Thanks be to God.
So, I felt like it was about time to talk about the Psalms again. I made a decision last year in the spring to say, as our call to worship every morning, I think we should start using a song as our call to worship. Instead of something I've written, instead of something that some curriculum liturgy person wrote recently, let's just add a little bit more vegetables into our fruit juice, right? And just get some Psalms into our life. Because the book of Psalms is the longest book of Scripture. It has more chapters than any other book. It takes up a lot of space in our Bible. And it is hard to get a grasp on without just a whole bunch of exposure. Because it's not like, a book like 1st and 2nd Kings where you can it's a story, and you get a general grab of the history. Each psalm is different, and it's not intellectual. It's not something where you can just say, well, this is what they're really driving at with Psalms. Like, no, they're driving at all sorts of things, and it's beautiful, and it's metaphorical, and so I wanted to just expose us to Psalms, because I have a secret plan. The 23rd Psalm is far and away the most famous psalm. It's really familiar. It's often the first psalm we learn as children. It's like that and the Lord's Prayer. It's a great thing to pray over someone, to pray for yourself, and so to become this, this just anchor point that says, oh yeah, I know something about the Psalms, right? I know the first thing about the Psalms. I know Psalm 23. I actually have it memorized. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. When I last spoke to you about it, I pointed out the nature of parallelism. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I find an important key to understanding the Psalms is to notice that they rhyme. And when I say that they rhyme, I don't mean that they have the same ending sound on the end of lines or words like Dr. Seuss rhymes, but rather, because that's not interesting in Hebrew. That basically always happens. The same part of speech always ends the same way. Rather, that they rhyme in meaning. So I'll say one thing, and then I'll say the same thing in a different way. And then I'll say a second thing, and then I'll say the same thing in a different way. Psalm 23, like nearly all the Psalms, does this. But the rhyme scheme is a lot more advanced. A lot of the Psalms, if you notice from our calls to worship, have a rhyme scheme of A, A, B, B, C, C, D, D. Psalm 23 does not do that. Let's get it back on the screen. Let's go back to the beginning. There we go. The Lord is my shepherd, and that rhymes with I shall not want. What does it mean to say that the Lord is my shepherd? Another way to say that is I shall not want. And you can see that the NRSV committee was kind of beholden to the KJV committee. They're using an ancient meaning of the English word want. That doesn't mean I would desire anything, right? But I shall not perish for want of food, for instance, would be a want used to have an association more like me. So I have everything that I really need. Why? Because the Lord's my shepherd. Because the person in charge of me is Yahweh, the Lord, all capitals. Then what happens next is, so that's AA, right? So what comes next? Well, we're expecting BD. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Okay, so we're going with this shepherd analogy, right? It's cool, shepherd analogy. Makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters. Great. So now we're using the metaphor and we're saying the same metaphor in two different ways. God's a good shepherd. He brings me to beautiful grassy fields. He brings me to great places to drink. I can visualize that. It's evocative. He restores my soul. So now we've got B prime. Do you see how that works? It's like a different way of doing B. I did the metaphor twice, and then I jumped out of the metaphor. Shepherds don't restore the souls of their sheep. They do lead them beside water and to pastures, but God, like a shepherd, metaphorically brings me to pastures and water, but then literally restores my soul. That's what I mean. But I can get the kind of, it's more advanced. We think of Psalm 23 as like super simple, right? This is the basic psalm. This is the psalm we teach the children. But what's going on poetically is actually really toe tap and fancy. He's doing cool stuff with the rhyme meter. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, or KJV says the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. This again is keeping going with the shepherd imagery. It's metaphorical shepherd imagery, but shepherds literally lead their sheep on paths. And so it's, what kind of path am I being led on? Let me go with the shepherd image. And the reason I fear no evil is because you are with me. Your or staff, even within the line, rod and staff, two ways of saying very similar things. Comfort me. Some iron there. This line, I think, is one of the biggest hiccups. Go ahead to the next one, Larry, right? So check this out. Whenever we read this, the temptation is to assume that the rhyme scheme is A, A, B, B. Right? And in some ways, in English, that will preach. And so I hesitate to say that's wrong, but I also think that's wrong. I think the intended rhyme scheme was A, B, B, A, which is how I read it to you just now. So, if we assume you prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies is one line, one sentence, then that implies that God sets our table to eat with the people who are trying to hurt us. Which, I have seen people for a very long time recite the psalm and believe that and think about what that looks like and think about, building a longer table, not a higher fence. And it's interesting, but man, it is not the same theme of comfort and peace and love and safety that we have been talking about thus far in the Winter Psalm. To say, oh yeah, I got a great table, God's really taking care of me, I don't fear any evil, He set the table for me, and my enemies are there. Similarly, if you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows is one sentence. That's too much oil. That's a cup full of oil. It's a lot. You drip, drip. What if the reading was, God, you are my shepherd. You lead me, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though I suffer, even though things go wrong in my life, I know that ultimately it is well with my soul. I fear no evil. God, you prepare a table before me. You're laying out the bounty, the feast. My cup overflows. Food, drink. And inside the capsule of food, drink, I have this overflowing cup. I have this laid out table before me. Is that in the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil. Oil is antibacterial. Oil is something that shepherds would give to sheep to protect them, to keep the bugs off them, to keep the cuts and bruises from becoming cystic and problematic. So there is this abundance that you give me, and even in the midst of the negative things, God, you're there as well. You're protecting me. You're making my blues better. In the presence of my enemies, you're anointing me with oil. My cup overflows. I'm overwhelmed by the abundance of not so much the oil as the food, the providence. And in the end, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Why? What's another way of saying it? Dwell in the house of the Lord always. It's a really, it deserves its place that it has earned and that it holds among the greatest poetry ever written. I mean, when we talk about great poems, we talk about the Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. We talk about Oh Captain, My Captain, and we often talk about the 23rd Psalm, and yet I feel like for many of us we lose the art. We lose the flair, the turns of the quill, the master strokes that go into it as it just becomes rote. And at the same time, and I'm already, I don't want this to be a 2-hour-long sermon, to talk about it and to talk about the theology of it, independent of the art of it, is so complicated because so much of it, because I could spend an hour just on the first line, just on the Lord is my shepherd. So, I want to say this. I want to say that we have read the Good Shepherd story from the Gospel of John. Jesus identifies himself as the Good Shepherd. We have sung songs about shepherding and the nature of God as a shepherd. We have now studied and done some literature fancy stuff on the Shepherd's Psalm, the 23rd Psalm, but I want to read to you some Talmud. I'm not reading out of the Talmud. This is a book called Short Stories by Jesus by a wonderful scholar. Her name is Amy Jill Levine. She is a Jewish New Testament scholar. So she herself is ethnically Jewish and worships God through Judaism, but she studies the New Testament professionally as a scholar. And she quotes this commentary from Exodus. So this is a rabbi writing about Exodus after the time of Exodus. It's just another story about sheep to put into your holster so that you can compare and contrast. And this, to me, I found, helps to illumine and helps to brighten metaphors whenever we can. That's why we read in the Old Testament reading, in addition to the more vegetables and fruit juice, right? That's why we read the Old Testament reading that kind of goes with the New Testament reading every week, is to say sometimes it helps, but it helps too. When we talk about shepherding, if you have any experience with sheep, then there's so many of these metaphors about I walk with sheep, I anoint their heads with oil. They make more sense. They help illumine. So here's a story about Moses. So what it says in the Bible is Exodus 3:1. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. That's what it says. That's what we have in the inerrant Word of God that Christians believe. But the story that one of the rabbis wrote in is to say the Holy One tested Moses by means of the flock. As our rabbis explained, when Moshe Rabbeinu, that's Moses our teacher, was tending Jethro's flock in the wilderness, a lamb scampered out, and Moses followed it until it approached a shelter under a rock. As the lamb reached the shelter, it came upon a pool of water and stopped to drink. When Moses caught up with it, he said, I didn't know that you ran away because you were thirsty. Now you must be tired. So he hoisted the lamb on his shoulders and started walking back with it. The Holy One then said, because you showed such compassion in tending the flock of a mortal, as you live, you shall become the shepherd of Israel, the flock that is mine. That is the word of some early rabbis. I think that's a lovely story that gives us such historical context about how shepherds were thought of and associated with spiritual leaders. Moses tended sheep, David tended sheep, and God tends us as one would tend sheep. I want to leave you with that image in your head. And if some of it is still open and still floaty and not all buttoned up, that's the Psalms for you. Let's confess the faith. Friends, what do you believe?